Wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here today for AAPI and Disabled, Our Stories, Our Voices. My name is Jay Jinpak. I am a project specialist for the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance, and I also identify as an Asian American immigrant with disabilities. I am very grateful that you're all here, and on behalf of the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance and our whole team, thank you all for being here to our event to recognize and celebrate Asian American, Pacific Islanders, and disabilities, to hear from our experiences and raise our perspectives. So quickly, as a quick introduction to the Alliance, the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance is an organization whose mission is to speak up for ourselves and each other while working together to make changes in our communities and in our state of Illinois. The Alliance was formed in 2008 by a group of self-advocates. And since then, some of our core activities have been doing leadership development, helping self-advocates build their leadership and public speaking and advocacy skills. We support self-advocates across the state in forming local groups to work together in their home communities, and a variety of education and trainings, as well as networking opportunities through and supporting self-advocates, again, all over our wonderful state of Illinois. And again, we may be a small group, but we have a strong network of self-advocates. And it's one of my things that I value is just learning from the self-advocates. So I'm gonna, again, welcome you all. In terms of a couple of housekeeping, I want to, in terms of for access, for those, we do have closed captioning. If you need closed captioning, you can access that through the little CC button at the bottom of the Zoom window. We also have Rhonda, who is providing ASL interpretation. Her window should be spotlighted, but you can also pin Rhonda's interpreter window on your end so that she is always visible to you. With that, I have the great pleasure and honor of introducing our Illinois Department of Human Services Secretary Grace Ho, who has some welcoming messages. So I'm going to stop the share and so we can see Grace.
Thanks, Jay Jen. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you to celebrate, honor, and reflect the heritage, culture, accomplishments, as well as challenges of all members of the AAPI community today, and especially AAPI members with disabilities. Each May, we celebrate AAPI Heritage Month by sharing and recognizing the achievements of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in history. And this year, our celebration is sobered by the increase in visible violence against the AAPI community across our country. Led by the community and elected leaders across the country, President Biden just recently signed additional federal protections against hate crimes. As you know, I'm a proud member of the AAPI community, a daughter of immigrants, and a staunch advocate for immigrant and disability rights. I've spent my career advancing social and racial justice, working in the nonprofit and public sectors, and striving to follow in the footsteps of so many great Asian Americans before me. So here, as the Secretary of the Illinois Department of Human Services, I'm proud to serve our state. And as part of Governor Pritzker's cabinet, I'm also honored to serve alongside the amazing Ronnie Patrick, the director of the Division of Rehab Services, a fellow AAPI activist, and someone who has worked hard her entire career to advance justice for people with disabilities. And I'm so glad to have her on my team. We at the Illinois Department of Human Services strives to be anti-racist and an organization that enables people of all abilities to thrive. Finally, I want to say a big thank you for having me and for lifting all of us up today. Have a great day and have a great discussion this afternoon. Thanks so much, Jay-Jin.
Thank you, Secretary Ho. Thank you very much for being with us today and for your wonderful words and support. Just to let everybody know, I've had the great pleasure and privilege and pleasure of working with Secretary Grace Ho when she was Assistant Secretary of DHS several years ago on a specific project, and have come to really respect and value her efforts and advocacy in raising and supporting the Pan-Asian community, and also recognizing the AAPI disability community within us. So thank you so much. Your support is very much appreciated. Now I want to introduce and turn the mic and camera over to the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities, Commissioner Rachel Arfa, who, again, I am also very grateful to have her join us with a message as well. So thank you. And Rachel, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Jay-Jin, for that introduction. My name is Commissioner Rachel Arfa. At the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities here in Chicago. I'll provide a brief visual description. I am a white woman with short and brown hair and hazel eyes, and I wear a flower dress with white flowers and a black and purple print, and I have white earrings. And behind me you see the bookshelf in my office at City Hall. And I am so honored to join you today to take a moment to celebrate the hard work and contributions and advocacy of the AAPI members with disabilities, and celebrate the community. And I'm so honored here to present this proclamation from Mayor Lightfoot in the city of Chicago. And I'm holding up the proclamation, and I'm going to read from it now, from the second half of the proclamation. Whereas me has been designated as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month and Asian American and Pacific Islander Disability Heritage Month, and whereas the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance will celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Disability Heritage Month by continuing their mission to educating people about the important intersection between disability and race. Now, therefore, I, Roy Lightfoot, Mayor of the City of Chicago, do hereby proclaim May 2021 to be Asian American and Pacific Islander Disability Heritage Month in Chicago, and encourage our residents to join in celebrating the many contributions of Asian American and Pacific Islanders who belong to the disability community. Dated this 19th day of May 2021, and then signed by Mayor Lightfoot. So congratulations at this celebration month, and I look forward to the rest of this afternoon's celebration and hearing from so many other members, the community, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Commissioner Arfa. I'm not sure if we had a technical glitch, but I'm very grateful, again, on behalf of the Alliance, and thank you very much for your support of the AAPI disability community and your work as Commissioner and MOPD's ongoing work of advocating and supporting folks with disabilities in Chicago. So thank you so much. And please pass along our thank you to Mayor Lightfoot. In terms of, just as a little information about the rest of our time together, we'll move on to our next bit is just a little bit of, we wanted to highlight some leaders in the who are identify as Asian American Pacific Islanders with disabilities. So there are some folks that I want to highlight. and raise voices originally of. After that, we'll go share some information about some highlights about Asian Americans in U.S. history. And then to finish off our time is a panel discussion with some amazing leaders and folks from the AAPI community that I've come to respect tremendously, and I'd be happy to follow as they lead with their wisdom and knowledge as well. So technology, I'm going to reshare my screen. So one sec. Okay. So quickly, just as in the next about 10, 15 minutes, I just want to highlight some celebrities and some historical facts. So in celebrating AAPI disabled leaders, the first person I want to do is highlight Senator Tammy Deckworth. And Senator Deckworth was gracious enough to send us a recorded message. So again, technology working, we will, hopefully this will work. So I'm going to play her message now.
Hello everyone. Happy Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. The American story as we know it would not exist if it were not for the strength of the AAPI community. And in honoring Asian American Heritage Month, we are reminded of the contributions of Asian Americans who have come to our shores from faraway nations, and of the continued contributions of their children and their children's children. But as we celebrate this rich history and diversity among our community this month, we can't overlook the painful and difficult year we've just endured in 2020. Time and again this year, members of the AAPI community have been attacked, have been shoved to the ground and pushed off their bicycles, have been denied service, spit on and kicked, treated as other than, as less than, simply because of the color of their skin. And unfortunately, this type of prejudice is far from new. Part of honoring the incredible journey and history of Asian Americans this month also demands that we reflect on some of the darker moments in our nation's history. Moments in which tens of thousands of people of Asian and Pacific Islander ancestry were forced into relocation and incarceration because of how they looked. Moments in which our nation's choices betrayed our nation's values. Look, we know that hate crimes against the AAPI community tend to be undercounted or simply go unreported due to, in part, to the persistent false notion that Asian Americans are, quote, not a real minority. Yet, despite this undercounting, hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders rose by nearly 150% last year, with one group finding that nearly 3,800 reports of anti-Asian hate incidents were reported in just the last 12 months. And the majority of those were against Asian women, in particular against elderly Asian women. So while I'd love to sit here and say that this kind of bigotry isn't American or isn't normal, the reality is, for the AAPI community, it's inextricably woven into everyday American experience. But we are making progress. Last month, the Senate passed my COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, sending a strong and resolute message that our entire nation is committed to ending anti-Asian hate. That is, it is long past time to break the cycle of discrimination, alienation, and otherization that has marred our country and scarred our community for far too long. This bill says to the AAPI community, we see you, we will stand with you, and we will protect you. This bill allows me to go home and tell my mom, my 80-year-old mom, who was harassed at the grocery store just a few weeks ago just because she's Asian, that we did something about it. That hopefully tomorrow she can walk down the produce aisle of the market without the same kind of fear of being harassed as she was to feel just yesterday. But this is a month of celebration, so I don't just want to reflect on the pain our communities have felt. It's important that we celebrate our joys as well, to celebrate our history and all that we've done to shape America into the beautiful, albeit flawed, nation she is today, and strive for that more perfect union every single day. It is time to honor both how far we've come and to recognize the work still left to be done to ensure that every Asian American and Pacific Islander and every other person, regardless of race, can achieve the American dream. Thank you.
So on behalf of all of us, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Senator Duckworth.
Hello, everyone.
So, apologies. Again, just wanted to thank and acknowledge and express thanks to Senator Duckworth for sending that message. And yes, Asian American Pacific Islander Month is a month for us to celebrate the rich diversity, cultural history, and art and music, and the richness of AAPI culture, and really appreciate it. But also, as Senator Duckworth eloquently put it, it is also a time to remember and acknowledge the challenges and some of the hardships and the pain as well, and not forget that. And so, amongst all the celebration and our time together as well, yes, we recognize the beauty, the richness, fun, the joys of AAPI and disability, but also very much acknowledge and keep in mind the challenges and use that. And my hope is we will use that information moving forward, fuel our energies to make positive change. As Senator Duckworth has done in her leadership role as a senator for Illinois in DC, as well as her service as a helicopter pilot in the military and as a veteran, become a very strong advocate for people with disabilities and disability justice. And she also just recently published a book. If you're so interested, you can look up as well. So that's Senator Duckworth as a leader. Another AAPI leader that we wanted to acknowledge is Alice Wong. Alice Wong is an amazing AAPI disabled leader who is founded the Disability Visibility Project. As she founded it out of her desire, because she noticed that there wasn't a lot of social media posts or blogs or media giving voice to people with disabilities, let alone people with disabilities of color, about their stories. So disability visibility is all about hearing stories from people with disabilities, from diverse disability communities, diverse backgrounds, cultural diversity, share their stories and learn from each other and help educate and inform the larger community as a whole. She has a very active podcast called Disability Visibility that I would encourage you all to check out if you haven't already. And she also, last year, I believe, or a year and a half ago, published the Disability Visibility book, which is featured on the slide, which is also an anthology of collected works, first-person accounts of diverse people with disability, sharing their stories and experiences of their lives of living as a person with a disability. So to Alice, I really want to acknowledge and encourage everyone to look her up and look up her Disability Visibility project. We also want to recognize Lydia X.C. Brown. Lydia is an attorney, formerly as an attorney. She also is a very, very strong and powerful, passionate advocate for disability rights, who also live at the intersection of disability, race, color, and gender. She does a lot of public speaking, is a very powerful speaker, and also in 2018 started and formed a conference highlighting disability, people of color, and again, lifting and allowing a space to share and hear stories of people with disabilities from various communities of color and raise their voices. And Lydia is also someone that I would very much encourage people to look up and to follow and see what resources she has, or they have, I should say. And Lydia goes by the pronouns of they, them. I also want to acknowledge and recognize Azima Akram, who came to my attention by one of our panelists today, Nafia Lee, who you get to meet a little bit. as you can see, Azima Akram is a judge, an administrative law judge at the Illinois Commerce Commission. Identifies as being part of the deaf and hard of hearing community, and as a post news story that she shared, her self-advocacy journey because of her disability was a big influence that helped shape her pursuit to become a lawyer and now a judge, of the importance of speaking up for oneself and advocating for accessibility. And again, acknowledging her journey, her support, as well as her also support and appreciation of the art community. I also want to acknowledge and recognize Tuet Lay. Tuet is an amazing, just an amazing leader. She was the executive director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice Chicago for a total of 19 years at that organization, leading efforts to advocate and push forward issues of immigration justice, supporting immigrants and refugees, racial equity, and in recent years, also connecting with the disability community. It continues her support currently as an independent consultant around nonprofit organizations, strategic planning, and also currently is on the board of Access Living, which is the local Center for Independent Living in Chicago. And finally, we want to acknowledge and celebrate Ronnie Patrick. Ronnie is one of the most amazing self-advocate leaders I've had the pleasure to know and have the privilege and the fortune of calling a friend as well. Ronnie has a long history of disability justice advocacy, and as a leader in helping and mentoring and supporting self-advocates in the disability community to find their voice, to advocate for independent living, to help support each other in independent living. And as Secretary Ho mentioned earlier, is now, as of May of 2019, is the director of the Division for Rehab Services in our state, providing guidance and leadership to support vocational rehabilitation services to all folks with disabilities across the state. And it is so, I'm so grateful to Ronnie's leadership and all her efforts. Also, I'm just proud to have an Asian American person be seen as a leader of this organization as well. So that is, in a nutshell, kind of a rundown of some of the leaders that I wanted to, just as a highlight of some. There are many, many more. And I ask that, this is just a little sampling, and I would encourage everyone to just spend some time looking up other folks, or if you know individuals who identify as Asian American or Pacific Islander disabilities in your own community or in your networks, to acknowledge them. I want to go quickly just to share a couple of highlights about some points in U.S. history regarding Asian Americans. And these are some facts that I am very appreciative to mentors and leaders of a group called Aja Shy, which is a community member-led organizing group connected with Asian American Advancing Justice that I have the pleasure of being part of. And that group put together some of this information as part of another campaign that they did. So again, just in terms of like the the connection of Asian Americans to the US. As early as 1587 to 1850, in that time is when Asian Americans first started to and became regular immigrants to the US. So as early as 1587 to 1850, Asian American identified folks started to show up to what is now considered the US. From 1875, it was the start of a series of laws being enacted or legal cases that started to restrict or ban Asian identified immigration to the US. A couple of those restrictions or bans were a result of, because of the time of 1863, 1869, Chinese workers, roughly 15,000 Chinese workers, helped build the Transcontinental Railroad. So Chinese Americans were a part of the building of the railroad in the US. And because of the increased immigrants, some of the unfortunate response, is because of some of the restrictive policies or acts. When World War II hit, one of the dark histories of US and shameful realities of US history was the Japanese internment camps. And a legal case that happened in 1944 that justified the implementation of the internment camps, which is, again, a sad and shameful part of our history. In 2001, after the attack on 9/11, there was increased violence and hate crimes against South Asian or Muslim communities, or those who were perceived to be Muslim or perceived to be South. And some of that can still be felt today. And then as recent as 2020, last year, because of as we all endured, our country and the globe recovered and still recovering from COVID, unfortunately, because of some of the very hateful, racist, anti-Asian rhetoric and propaganda from some parts of our country and leadership, that helped fuel anti-Asian hate. Again, this is not to put a downer on our festivities or our conversation today, but again, it is important to acknowledge some of the challenges and realities facing the AAPI community. And some of the experiences and history of the AAPI community is similar to the challenges faced by the disability community. Our disability community has had a history of struggle to be seen, to be heard. Disability communities has fought for equal pay, equal access to work, education, and services. And in some ways, Asian American Pacific Islander identified folks have had to fight to be seen and fight for equality and equity as well. This is not a comparison, nor am I saying that it's equal, just that some of the challenges are similar. And it is important to acknowledge that there are intersection identities that some of us belong to both. And with that, and I also wanted to share these realities, partly because, I didn't realize how early Asian Americans immigrated or arrived to the US, and just how connected our community, our AAPI communities were throughout US. And I think it is important to acknowledge that. And I would encourage all of you and myself to spend some time when we can to learn more about AAPI history and how it's part of the larger US history. And amongst all the other communities that make up. So I've been talking a lot, and I want to now transition to our panel. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I want to move on to a panel discussion and introduce some amazing folks who will just have agreed to share their perspectives about living at the intersection of Asian American Pacific Islander and disability. Grace Chow, Noah Ohashi, Nafia Lee, and Dawen May. For me, I'm going to change my view to, excuse me if I can close the camera. So, Dawen, Grace, Nafia, and Noah, if you can free to come off mic. And to begin with, I'm happy to play moderator for this conversation. We have some questions to go over, and yes, we have some questions, but I'm hoping for it to be also a conversation amongst all of us as well. And for the participants, if you have questions or comments that come up, please put them in the chat. We will have some time after after we go through the questions so we can address your questions or comments. So to begin with, if you all could do a short introduction of who you are, as well as address the question of what is it like to live as a disabled AAPI person, and how has being disabled being a disabled AAPI influenced your personal life, be it work or personal? Who'd like to go first?
I can go first just for the sake of starting off, and obviously I don't mean to monopolize the conversation, but I'll just really quick give an intro. Thanks, Jajan. So my name is Nafia, and I am a disability rights advocate. Well, I am a relatively new disability rights advocate. For an image description, I am a South Asian woman with dark black hair, and I'm wearing gold hoop earrings, and I'm also wearing a navy print, flower print sweater, seated in front of a staircase. So I would say that, in addition to being a disability justice advocate, I would definitely say that my experience, especially at the intersection of being somebody who lives with a mental illness, as well as being, a Pakistani woman, I definitely think that it's offered a very unique perspective. For instance, in my community, in the South Asian community specifically, a lot of disability rights staff members and folks in our community have a really difficult time navigating spaces because we're often the only people at our tables, right? So for instance, on my staff at the ARC, I am the only Asian Americans person, but I'm also the only person who will tell people that I consider myself disabled. I think it's really one of those spaces that it still has a lot of stigma, and there's this hesitancy to say I'm AAPI and I'm disabled. And so I really want to use my platform to break that stigma and also really just open conversations like these. So thank you, Jajan.
Thank you, Nafia. Grace?
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Chow, and I'm a Chinese American, and I have muscular dystrophy. For almost 12 years, I've been teaching sociology and social science to undergraduate students. Before that, I spent several years working at nonprofit organizations, as well as state government, focusing on issues centered on disability rights and services. I was also a grant writer where I worked in diverse programs at a local university. Currently, I'm a board member of the statewide Independent Living Council, and I'm on their executive outreach and advocacy committees. So I guess the two questions are, what is it like to live as a disabled AAPI person? And how is being disabled in AAPI influence my personal life? So I guess I'll talk a little bit about when I was growing up. Growing up, I was constantly bullied for being who I am. People always reminded me that I was different, that I didn't belong. I often longed for that sense of inclusion, acceptance. I didn't feel welcome by members of my own culture as well as by the larger society. There were a lot of times growing up when my parents didn't allow me to attend certain events where a lot of first generation Chinese other than family were in attendance that they let my brother attend. My brother has the same disability as me, but didn't progress until he was older. I used to get upset that I couldn't go. My mom explained that they were protecting me from Chinese elders who would not understand or accept my disability. They told me that people would stare at me, gossip about our family, and I was upset and thought my parents were ashamed of me. But they always reassured me it was from my own protection. There's just a lot of stigma in the Chinese community. So, you know, there was another instance where we joined a Chinese church when I was very young. And they rented a space from an accessible church. But a few years later, when the time came to build their own church, they built one with stairs and no accessible entrance, shutting my family and I out. So my parents felt let down by their own community. And I think that was the last time as a family that we socialized with members of the Chinese community other than our family. They were hurt and disappointed. So for me, it's been hard because it's like growing up, I didn't feel accepted by my own community, but also as you know, as a disabled Asian woman, I've had a lot of racism and stereotypes that have been encountered from just the larger society. And most of this has come because of like majority of this has been because of being an Asian woman and the fetishizing that occurs because of this. Most raised in a system I've encountered has been racism disguised as humor. People have cracked jokes about me eating rice, making Asian accents, them having yellow fever. A man in college used to call me a slant-eyed slut as a joke. They thought it was like a funny term of endearment rather than, an offensive slur. I also have constantly experienced treatment, which can be described as being treated like the exotic other or professional foreigner. Like, where are you from? And then I answer Chicago. And then they say, where are you really from? I've been like harassed many times on public transportation. The most recent instance was when this guy in the CT train kept taunting me and calling me Tammy Deckworth. So there's, it's been hard, but my experiences also growing up at with these, being an Asian American woman with disability allowed me to view things through an intersectional lens at a very young age. I learned early on that to fight oppression in all its forms, we must tackle it through an intersectional lens. It's from my own experience in life that I strive to accept others for who they are, and I have a strong belief in social justice because of this. And I really believe in union diversity in all its forms. I think it's great to be different. I have friends who are from all races, religions, cultures, disabilities, genders, and sexual orientations. My spouse is a Mexican immigrant, and it's been wonderful learning and experiencing each other's cultures through the years, as well as recognizing similarities in our cultures as well. Sorry, I went a little long.
No apologies. It's Grace. Thank you so much. You said a lot, and I think that's and I think you connected some of the struggles around the mono-minority that the larger AAPI community struggles with and deals with. And unfortunately, the reality that we who are part of the AA community still struggle with the question of where are you from, and the message or that idea that somehow we're alien or we're foreign or perpetually foreign, even if we were born here or have lived the majority of our lives here. And that is an ongoing challenge, as well as the struggle of challenges with being also disabled, of access and some of the stigma around that. So it's very much appreciate your willingness to share so much, and there's a lot to think about. And just kind of add to our bucket of information and knowledge. And I ask Da Win, would you like to do a little quick intro of yourself and share your perspectives of what it's like living as an AAPI disabled intersection and how it's affected your life?
Did you call my name?
Oh, Da Win. Oh, no, oh, sorry. Well, actually, Noah, you can go if or Darwin, Darwin, are you able to, you have to, oh, Jesus, I'm having problems talking. If Darwin, if your tech is working and you can come off mute, please share your perspectives.
I am Darwin, and I'm in Chinatown, and I like speaking up and helping the community speak up because I know the more information. Like I'm always on the computer and look up requests for people that want that. And I will help people do stuff like if they having computer trouble, I can guide them to it. And always stuck at home, relying on Zoom to do, relying on video to help support them, and more difficult because it's more easier to help in person than in video, than on a phone call or video. So I'm always providing updated news, like for the Asian families, I tell them what.
Thank you, Darwin. I mean, it's like, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. and I'm providing with them anything they want me to do, and I like helping out people. That what I that what I that are what I have now. And thank you.
Thank you, Darwin. Thank you for your help and support and your leadership with the Darwin is part of the Going Home Coalition, has been putting guidance and input with that coalition's efforts, and your support and involvement with helping self-advocates speak up and speak out is important. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, I want to over to Noah, if you can, your perspective of what it's like at the intersection of disability and AAPI.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. I'm Noah Ohashi, he, him. I'm wearing dark green glasses and brown hair and white shirt, and background is my arts that it's not perfect. Anyhow, I am trans disabled API person, but to explain what is my life is like to live as a trans AAPI disabled person, I think it's important to know my background. My background is Japanese, but it's hesitant to say Japanese because I'm not Japanese. It's kind of complex. My ancestor is actually Korean, and they were taken to Hawaii when they needed a sugarcane farm. So they're pretty much free labor. They called free labor at the time, and they worked at the Hawaii. So I have a Hawaiian ancestor as well. And after the World War II, they returned to Japan because they were in the Japanese incarceration system and were raped. So that's the reason at the time, my family have white-ish people, but American didn't like it. So they came back after the World War II. Actually, I don't have a Japanese blood, but I was born in Japan and raised in Japan as a disabled person. I have an autistic and a ADHD, and living in the Japanese society, especially I was born in the north side of Japan, which is really countryside and like rural area. So it was really hard to get an equal education, but at least my family was kind of pushy, so they pushed. But at the same time, I had a hard time because in Japan, people said I'm not Japanese enough. I'm the outsider. I don't look Japanese. And that's the stigma I had, internal stigma that I had. So I really wanted to get out from that zone. And that's the reason I moved here, not in Chicago, but first Colorado. And when I was 18, but I was really discouraged because I couldn't speak English at all. My family doesn't speak English at all. I know Japanese, but and a little bit Korean, and a little bit Tagalog because I have ancestor in Filipino too. So as a multi-race, it's hard to know where I fit in and what's my identity is. And as Grace mentioned, where I am from, and it's really, I don't know, because I'm multi-race. And so I struggled, and I came back to Japan, and I start having more symptoms of muscular dystrophy, and I required to have a personal care attendant. And that's when I experience institution, and for 3 years, and after the earthquake, Japan had a huge earthquake. I started escape there and start having had help from Center for Independent Living at work. I work for right now, and in 2018, I moved to Chicago and started my journey in America. But it was really hard, the transitioning part, because I lived whole life in Japan, and I don't know any system at the time about how to live independently in the US. I didn't know how to get Medicaid. I didn't know how to get healthcare. Healthcare is so complicated in the US system. It's not universal. In Japan, it's so simple. It's universal healthcare. Like, you can go whatever doctor, and the insurance covers everything. The government insurance covers everything. So the biggest thing was to get a PA, to get a personal care attendant, and also to get healthcare and find a good doctor that matches me was really hard for me to navigate. And that was the hardest part that I faced as a transitioning. And additional thing is, because I don't look like typical Asian that people think, so people see me as American or other non-Asian people. So when I'm trying to speak and I have an accent, and they say that, oh, your accent doesn't seem Asian. And I'm like, okay, but you don't understand what I'm trying to say. Because they don't catch when R and L is hard to say for me, because it's not my native tongue language. So those experiences kind of maybe having hide kind of against internal stigma that where I'm from and where do I fit. And even when I'm talking about racism, people tend to talk about, I don't want to comparison. It's not comparison, but when I talk about racism, about Asian racism, within the whole racism structure in the community, broad community, people tend to talk about Black racism or brown racism, but we don't talk about how Asian experiences within the context of racism. And when I speak, because so less representation of Asian community, there's so less voices, and I feel like I'm just speaking to myself or by myself, and that is really sometimes burns me out. And I think that's the biggest thing that I experience in what is life is like as a disabled AAPI person in the US.
Wow, thank you, Noah. I mean, like everybody else, you've shared a lot, and very grateful for sharing your personal perspectives, and I think, hearing everybody's backgrounds and what you all shared, again, and I think it's important to say, it may be obvious, but I think this is important to say, is that just the diversity of the AAPI community and how diverse and different our experiences are to one another. And I say that as a way of as a reminder to ourselves and everybody else that yes, we can claim and embrace all our identities, but also as a reminder of acknowledging the difference and being cautious of the danger of generalization or lumping us all together in some homogeneous group, which is not fair to individuals as well as our different backgrounds, and the challenges of, and Noah and Grace, you both talked about some of the challenges or experiences of how people perceive you, of in one case the exoticism or the feminine the eroticism of female identified Asian Americans, and on the other hand, because of one's appearance not being perceived as Asian, or that and the struggles, the challenges, frustration that also. And again, I think those are great examples of a similar challenge that faces community. It's the idea of breaking stereotype and really pushing the reality that, yes, we may be Asian, but we're all different. We're all different. And each of our different heritages and backgrounds and identities are equally valid. And it's important to just really, really ask and encourage everyone to really move to that place of respecting individual identity and valuing the different cultural, our individual and collective cultures. And before I get too much off further into my soapbox, I will move us along to the next group of questions, which is asking you all to share, from your collective, from your individual and collective experience of living Asian American, Pacific Islander, and disabled, looking at the disability community and our Asian American community. Do you feel that the disability and AAPI communities see our Asian disabled members or not? And what would be your message, demand, or request from those respective communities to help support those of us who identify as AAPI? Who wants to take on that?
I can go next, I guess.
Thanks, Grace.
Oh, I forgot to do my image description. I am an East Asian woman with dark hair, shoulder-length hair with reddish highlights, and glasses, wearing a orange shirt and hoop earrings. So first, overall, in the disability rights movement, I feel that in the disability rights movement, like many other movements in society, whether it be women's rights, LGBTQ rights, etc., do not represent people of color very well. Our voices are often invisible or silent. Many movements, including the disability rights movement, are overwhelmingly white. I think AAPIs in particular are often ignored, even if the input of people of color are sought. For Asian American, Pacific Islanders with disabilities, or immigrants, I think there can be language and cultural barriers as well. And I think these issues should be addressed more for those working in disability rights or on disability rights. In terms of like feeling seen and heard as disabled AAPI in our own communities, I think that it's important to examine the experience of being disabled from a cultural context. Asian Americans who feel alienated from the rest of society often find solace in their own communities, but disabled people often feel alienated from their own cultural growth because of the stigma attached to a disability. So there's often no sense of belonging for many disabled Asian Americans, especially with the stigma of disability. I think because we come from a collective, rather individual focused society, disabled people are not seen as being able to contribute equally to the common good of society because our limitations so stereotypes such as the model minority myth, may be particularly damaging in shaping the self-esteem and self-identity of disabled Asian Americans, especially coming from a culture that values being able to contribute fully to society, and the added pressures based on stereotypes from the larger society. I think that there's many conflicts because we struggle between two worlds, that and the collective Asian society and the individual oriented American society. So I think it's difficult to assess how a third dimension disability fits in all of this. I think disability and mental illness are rarely discussed or acknowledged in many of our families. Traditionally, they have been taboo topics in Asian cultures, when many in the older generation still believing in superstitious ideas that disability may be the result of bad karma. But I do think that times are changing. There have been so many organizations and groups out there that have been trying to bring more awareness of mental health issues and disability, and also with prominent Asian American disability activists like Alice Wong and many others bringing disability to the forefront of AAPI consciousness. I think even locally here in recent years, you know, like a group that we've been involved in, in the Asian Giving Circle, has had some cycles where they've given grants focused on disability and mental health. And I think on a personal level, I've always talked to my family about disability and mental health, even it's been uncomfortable at times. I think we need to push our AAPI families and communities to have tough conversations. I think we have a long way to go, but I think it's a start, like a good start.
No, I would agree. And thank you, Grace. Yes. The challenge is the importance of finding ways of having these kind of conversations with our families, as well as looking at increasing representation and to to both the disability and the AAPI community. Who wants to go next, or should I call somebody?
So I just want to say,
Yes.
first of all, Grace and Noah and Dawan, I just want to thank you for sharing what are frankly very traumatic opportunities in someone's life. I just cannot tell you enough how much I hear you and see you. So I just want you to know that that's really traumatic what all of you have gone through. So just please know that I see you and hear you fully. So thank you for that. Secondly, to answer your question, Jajan, I just want to say ditto to everything Grace just said. I know one big problem that I've noticed, and again, I'm not speaking for every single South Asian person, just like I'm not speaking for every single disabled person, but at the intersection of Asian American community leaders, as well as the disability justice movement, I think it's also important to recognize that when you're the only person in a space that identifies as disabled, it is so difficult to not feel alone and to not feel supported. For every dollar, if I had $1 for every time I've had to explain to somebody why they shouldn't use the R word, or why saying the word special needs is ableist, or why do people literally in our languages, I'll just give you an example. In the language I speak, Urdu, the word for disabled is literally that you don't have any limbs. And that language is so powerful, the same way that language that explains if someone has special needs, I cringe when I hear that, or when somebody says you have, you're able-bodied or non-able-bodied. Those words in our languages, for instance, can be very ableist in its very nature. So again, I do not represent, I'm not, we are, as AAPI disabled people, we are not a monolith, but I think it is so incredibly important to show that every community has such a very deeply ingrained message that you get from a very young age. And it is always a difficult journey to have to not only entangle your own identity, identity within the lenses that you work in, the spaces in which you take space up, but you're also navigating the systems in which you belong to. So it's really tricky. And so I just kind of wanted to affirm, Dawen, Grace, and Noah, I just really want to send you lots of strength, because this is not something that any of us signed up for. Same thing with you, Jajan. I just think that nobody signed up for this life. But I think experiences like ours that are being shared right now are so crucial to changing the narrative. So I have every hope that, for instance, the language that I use with my own family in my native language will shape the way the conversations I have with my son. My son also happens to be half Black and half Pakistani. So I need to have these uncomfortable conversations with him, but it has to start with us. And 100%, I agree with what Grace said. We have to keep our families accountable too. I mean, oftentimes the people we love are the very people that are unable to affirm our own identities because they're so worried about what will other people think. And so I just wanted to let people know it's really important, especially because many of us come from collective communities. We're not from the community of pick yourself up by the bootstraps. That's not how our communities were raised. And that's not how I was raised. That is very unique to the Asian American Pacific Islander experience. And so I really just want to remind people that when that's the community you come from, it's really frustrating trying to explain that to non-AAPI members, even within the disability community, because we are, again, the disability community, we're not a monolith. Even with the Asian American Pacific Islander community, we're not a monolith. So that's just my little TED talk for the day. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Nafia. And I appreciate you bringing up language. And yeah, the diversity of our languages and how and the power of language and the importance of thinking about how we use language, both in our own in our native languages, as well as the main language in the U.S. in the U.S. culture, and just be thoughtful of that, the impact of that. Dawa, Noah, do you have any responses to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First, I want to echo Grace and Nafia. I totally I was nodding so much. But the biggest thing I feel is when you're in Asian community, you feel like you're the only person who have a disability. So you try to go into the disability community, and then you feel like you're the only person who are Asian. So you feel like you don't have the place you can embrace yourself as a whole. Even I'm queer and trans. If you go to trans and queer community, you're the only person you're trans or queer who have a disability. And if you go to disability community, you have so many trans and queer people, but not so many Asian person. So I think lack of representation of Asian disabled person overall is really hard to navigate and feel so isolated sometimes. And that also affects the mental health that I already exist having. And another thing that I wanted to echo with both of Grace and Nafia mentioned, our community, I don't say our because everyone's is different, but my experience of my family and community is really collective. Even I started living independent, but I learned after I moved to the US, the differences of terminology. We say independent in Japanese, it means in English contents is interdependence. It's not independent. We are community, we are collective, we help each other, we are really tight. So we have so much drama, but at the same time, because we're so collective and so close, but we have somebody really close to your side, and they might be disabled person, they might not be disabled person, but we're really tight, and that is really nice, and at the same time makes conflicts. And I feel like that's a good and bad. I don't say this is good or this is bad, but sometimes it's really hard to explain non-Asian disabled community about the collectiveness and the strength of collectiveness, and why I'm telling this idea, or the root of what I'm talking about is of my background and my history and my collective movement that I had as a collective community. When people couldn't get it, I still feel like lack of communication and lack of understanding of our culture, as I feel like it's still, we have a much to talk about it and have a dialogue to have better understanding for each other's. And I think that's a biggest thing that it's still not met. And because it's collective, a lot of time as especially mental health is really hard to open and having a dialogue. It really stigmatizing Asian culture, and even the therapist or we call it specialist doctor, whatever, they think my parents did really bad thing, but that is because in Asian culture, like the parents hitting the kids, or like that's regular thing at that age. Like it's like really collective and close collective culture. It's sometimes perceived in Western culture it's a bad thing, but that's regular thing for me, and I don't want to be dismissed, but sometimes I feel like it's dismissed. So like I wish I could have more conversation, not in front of the therapist or doctor, more within the community. And I think that is the really missing key point that I want to tell to not only non-AAPI community, but to all the community.
Thank you, Noah. It's the importance of communication and education, and just keep pushing each other to see each other, and it's important, and acknowledging, some of this, and again, acknowledging mental health is a real concern, and fighting some of the stigma within our communities comes up again, is one of those challenges. And it's just, all of this again is just a reminder of just complexity of everything, and the importance of avoiding, as we've mentioned, the idea of a monolith community, and really recognizing the nuance and differences of each other. Dawen, I wanted to check in, like if you wanted to share your thoughts and perspectives on the disability community and the AI community being seen and heard. What are your thoughts?
The community is had to be the only speak up person in Chinatown, because it's only me. But if we come together as one and make it a little bit easier to have this thing, have this support. So hopefully soon we can get back in person and like speak up more for the community and try to help get more stuff get more program going, get more funding for stuff. So yeah, get them. The hard thing is to get more funding for the program to do it now. And everything costs money. So,
Yeah, no, thank you, Doe. And you know, that is an important, that is something that to also advocate for and to acknowledge is in terms of services, disability services and services serving our AAPI communities, the importance to speak up and advocate for to our funders to fund programs that connect with the AAPI and disability community. You know, helping AAPI serving organizations becoming accessible and learning about accommodations.
Carefully, not doing too much on your own.
And for those of us, and for disability serving organizations,
Showing off your
giving funding.
I don't care.
Can you all, oh, I'm hearing some background noise. If they can put you on mute.
Huh? Yeah, probably.
So ask Christine if you can identify that person, if you can put them on mute. Thank you. Just to cut back on background noise. So again, you know, the importance of supporting organizations to push for funding to support everything from language services and translations, as the disability community fight for funding to support ASL and captioning services, accommodation services, to also support language access and multiple language access, and for AAPI organizations and funders that support Asian American Pacific Islander communities to fund those organizations to be disability inclusive as well. As we're approaching kind of the conclusion of our time, the last, and we've talked about a lot of and I am very appreciative to Noah, Darwin, Grace, and Nafia for just all your willingness and courage and openness to share your personal perspectives as the challenges. But I also want to, you know, and we want to acknowledge the challenges and the work that needs to continue. But I also want to acknowledge the fun and the joys of living at this intersection. So quickly, if you can go around and just in a quick, short bit, just share what joys and what is fun about living as an AAPI disabled person. I can share for me personally, I really have come to love this intersectionality because it has helped me grow more and open me up to, you know, being more open to appreciating difference, and allowed me to connect with some amazing people who have introduced some fun activities and things that have made me smile over the years. So I appreciate that. Noah, I'm going to start with you. What's a joy? What's a joy, one or two, of living at this?
I will say, because as I mentioned, our community is more collective. I feel like I have so much family that like actual family, not like blood family, but actual family and really tight family in so many places all around the state. And I feel like that's really, like, it's more joy, but grateful about being a AAPI disabled person. And also, as Jajan mentioned, I'm really grateful to being as an AAPI disabled person, to know a depth of what is racism and content of being as immigrants and so many, like the words of equity and diversity, like the word itself seems it's easy, but it goes more deep, and to have those insight by living in the state is really, I'm grateful and I'm very proud to be a AAPI disabled person. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. Darwin, what is one thing that is a joy for you to be AAPI disabled?
The one thing I like about this the growing and being Zoom at the same time, and being the family, the support, the community, and help out people that don't feel isolated, like nobody to hang out with, but we hang out on Zoom, like on Saturday, we hang out with Chewy and we watch movie and all kinds of stuff, and I have fun with that. So it's not like fun in person, but online we watch all kind of movie, like we talk about what we did throughout the whole weekend, what's so fun and what not so fun. And we just open up and just talk like a family, I guess. So that was, I have fun doing that. Although I've been missing for a couple of times this couple of weeks because I have some other thing I need to get done, but hope to be back with you.
Okay, thank you, Darwin. I appreciate that. And Grace, what's a joy for you?
Joy is to be with people like you guys. I mean, I feel like, growing up, I was always the only one. There was never any Asian people with disabilities anywhere. And, it's great to be in an event like this, to hear from, Noah, Nafia, Darwin, Jijin, and over the years, I've made so many friends in the, who are AAPI and disabled. And I feel like if I had that growing up, there are so many experience I've had would have been easier, life, to see and feel heard by people who have similar experiences as you is a great thing. And the other thing I wanted to say is, like, being disabled, Asian, and woman is who I am. Every experience I've had, positive or negative, has contributed to my identity. It hasn't always been easy to accept myself, but I would not be who I am with all these aspects of my identity. And none alone define me, will all create the whole of me. And, being finally able to accept myself for who I am, I think there's definitely joy in that.
Indeed. Thank you, Grace. And Nafia, what's a joy for you?
So quoting my mom, who sometimes can be very much like a fortune cookie, and no pun intended, because I know we're Asian American, she always says that life is a journey, not a destination. And so I can honestly say, you know, what Noah and what Grace and Dawan said, you find community in every, you know, space you're in. But more than anything, I think you're always learning from other, you know, fellow justice work activists. Like, there's never a dull moment. I mean, I joke with JJ, like a third of our conversations to 2/3 of our Zoom conversations are me ranting about something racist someone did or ableist something someone did. And then we, you know, oh my God, rage about it for 5 minutes and then we move on. I really just think on top of building community, you're so aware of just how much you have to learn from your peers. And so I just really appreciate learning with you all today. And I'm just so excited for us to, now as we're slowly getting vaccinated, we can all get together, hopefully in the Chicagoland area very soon, and continue learning from each other, because I really think we have a long way to go and we can work together and, you know, frankly, help each other, lift each other up when we're down. And just, we have to show up for each other, right? Whether we're Black, whether we're Asian, whether we're Pacific Islander, whether we're Muslim, whether we're Christian, whether we're Buddhist, doesn't matter. We have to stand up for each other. And, you know, today is the memorial for George Floyd a year later. And so I think we all on this call, I think participants and presenters recognize just how much our work is cut out for us, and intersectionality matters. So just thank you all for being here, and thanks for letting me learn with you.
Well said. Thank you all. And I know we're a little over time. So just as a conclusion, and I just really want to thank all of you for being here, for sharing this space. I am, with more than words can express, I'm just so proud to be part of the Asian American Pacific Islander community and the disability community. And I'm just so proud and excited and humbled and appreciate the opportunity to be part of both incredibly wonderfully diverse and rich communities that have given me so much. And appreciate Darwin, Noah, Nafia, Grace for being here and sharing and being so open and honest with your experiences and knowledge, and for all of you being part of this conversation. And with that, again, on behalf of the Alliance, much appreciation and gratitude. Thank you to Christine Beck, who is our Alliance Operations Director, who's been the amazing backbone of today's, keeping track of Zoom, making sure everything is running smoothly and no technical glitches. Thank you, Christine. And with that gratitude, please, thank you all. Have a wonderful night. And thank you so much. Take care all.